Good morning. Let us look at 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 11 onwards, and all the way to verse 17. In this passage, Paul is elaborating about the quarrel, the division in the church at Corinth. And he mentioned in verse 12 the problem. Some of them are saying, I follow Paul. Some are saying, I follow Apollos. Some are saying, I follow Cephas. And still others, he says, I follow Christ. And Paul is questioning this, questioning them. He says, is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? William Barclay mentions possibly there are 4 types of people in the church at Corinth. The first group were those who were so much influenced by Paul's life. They were probably baptized by Paul, or they might have heard the gospel from Paul, so they were deeply impressed by Paul's life, and so they said, I follow Paul. They loved Paul because of his simple gospel, because of his life and his commitment. The second group were those who were influenced by Apollos. Apollo was a Jew who was from Alexandria, and Alexandria in the first century was well known for intellectualism. And probably the way Apollo preached was very effective, powerful, eloquent, and he was a very gifted preacher. But the problem is that you can sometimes intellectualize the simple gospel, and you can reduce a religion into a philosophy. People can be so much fascinated by your rhetorics and your eloquence, and then they can become your follower. I had a problem in the beginning of my days with apologetics. Apologetics for evangelism. Sometimes it was so much intellectualized. The epistemology and logics were used, and it almost undermined the power of gospel in its simplicity. So there was the group who follows Apollo and say, I follow Apollo. The third were the group who said, I follow Cephas. Cephas were the one who was perhaps a Jewish legalist who emphasized on the law that is given in the Old Testament. And they try to somehow undermine the grace of God and belittle the grace and say, no, you have to follow the Mosaic law. The fourth group were those who said, I follow Christ. Following Christ is nothing wrong, but when you become so much arrogant in your claim that you follow Christ, you may say follow Christ, but actually you mean Christ follow you. So, in other words, you could almost say that I am the only true Christians and all others are fake Christians. And if you agree with me, then you are a true Christian. So there were a group who were at Corinth who were say, I follow Christ, but they had a problem with walking with others. So that's the problem in the Corinth divisions among the 4 types of people saying, I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, I follow Cephas, and I follow Christ. But Paul asked this question, very good question. He says, is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Were you baptized into the name of Paul? I am thankful that I did not baptize any of you except Crispus and Gaius. No one can say that you were baptized into my name. Yes, I also baptized the household of Stephanas. Beyond that, I don't remember if I baptized anyone else. Sometimes the politics of baptism can also divide the church. How much water you should use, who baptized you, whether you are baptized by this person or that person, or this denomination or that denomination, or that mission agency or this mission agencies. There was a time when the church growth movement was at the peak, and then now it is church planting. The emphasis in those missionary days about the mass baptism. How do you measure the growth of church growth or church planting? You can, there is no way, tangible way. So you start using the number of baptism as the way to, measure your success. And so some of these indicative can become imperative. If you have baptized this many numbers, then only you have this many church. So baptism itself can be a politics. It can be used as a way to divide the church. And so it is now. Today, the church is divided along the line of who baptized whom and who registers the number of baptism or names of the baptized. In fact, in one of our meeting in Thailand, we were talking about the number of baptisms. And if you total it, all the baptism that reported by different mission agencies, it exceeds the number of, perhaps it would exceed the number of the population of that country. So the politics of baptism can divide even the church. So that's why verse 17, chapter 1, Paul says, "For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with the words of human wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power." If you start emphasizing more than necessary, of course, baptism is an important ordinance of the church. But if you emphasize too much on it, then you are emptying the cross of Christ from its power. The power lies in the gospel, the power lies in the cross, and the power lies in Jesus Christ. Jesus came to unite, and reconcile men to God, not divide them, but as we reconcile to God, we also reconcile to each other. So that's why Paul was addressing this question and asking, is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? I think at the end of the day, the church always need to remember who do we belong to and who do we stand for, and what is the ultimate mission of the church. May God help us to learn from Paul and learn from the mistakes of the church at Corinth. You have a wonderful day, and may you enjoy this day. Blessings.